Some jobs put you miles from the nearest living soul. Fire tower on a peak, a lighthouse on a rock, a control room in a dead refinery. You're the only one on shift. It's the only one for miles. That's what they tell you anyway. Welcome to True Terror Files Official. All three people in tonight's stories worked alone, so that was the deal. They signed up for the solitude, the quiet, the long hours with nothing but their own thoughts, and the creak of old wood or the hum of distant machinery. But each of them, in their own way, came to realize that they were not as alone as they believed. Something else was there on the night shift with them. Something that had been waiting for someone to clock in. A fire lookout in the North Cascades, who noticed a second silhouette on the catwalk. A lighthouse keeper in Maine who learned that a light this old never really goes dark. And a refinery security guard in Louisiana who found a door that had been sealed since the Nixon administration, with a light still burning on the other side. Their nightmares haven't. If you've ever worked a night shift and felt that, to prickle on the back of your neck like you were being watched by a coworker who wasn't on the schedule, you already know where this is going. Hollis Pritchett had been staffing the Desolation Peak lookout for 7 seasons. A one-room glass-walled cabin perched on a volcanic crag in the North Cascades at 6,100 feet. Reachable only by a 12-mile switchback trail that took 8 hours to climb and for it to descend if you were stupid enough to run. The job was simple. Watch for smoke, log the weather, check the radio twice a day, and manage your own sanity through the 90-day fire season. Hollis loved the solitude. He'd left a failed marriage and a dead-end teaching career back in Bellingham, and the tower was the first place in his life that felt like it wanted him there. This particular July had been dry, the forest a tinderbox, and he'd been sleeping light with the windows cracked to smell the wind for any hint of smoke. On the night of the 18th, around 2 a.m., he woke to the sound of footsteps on the exterior catwalk. The catwalk encircled the entire tower, narrow wooden walkway with a rusted steel railing, and footsteps on it had a distinct rhythm, a hollow, weather-worn clunk, followed by the faint creak of 2 specific loose boards just outside the south-facing window. Hollis sat up, grabbed his flashlight, and swept the beam through the glass. Nothing. The catwalk was empty. He told himself it was a pine marten, maybe a raccoon, but he knew the weight of those animals didn't match the clunk of a boot heel. The next night, he heard it again, same time, same pattern. Only this time the footsteps stopped directly outside the east window, the one facing the drop-off and the valley below. He didn't turn on his light. He just watched the dark shape of the window, and after maybe 30 seconds, he saw something pass across the glass. Not an animal. Silhouette. Human-sized. Moving slowly along the catwalk railing, one hand dragging along the metal as it went. He heard the faint squeal of a wet finger on rusted steel. Hollis grabbed his radio and called the district office in Marblemount. No response. The relay station went offline after midnight. He sat in his chair with his hunting knife until dawn, and at first light he walked the entire catwalk and found absolutely nothing out of place. No footprints, no hand marks, nothing but a single old logging boot print pressed into the dust on the railing that could have been his own. He convinced himself it was sleep deprivation and moved on. Then, on the night of the 23rd, while logging the day's readings in the tower's bound record book, he flipped back through the pages to compare humidity levels from the previous season and noticed that the handwriting in the 1984 entries didn't match the name on the logbook's cover. The cover read Jensen, 1984, but the entries were signed by a man named Calderoan Calder. a name Hollis vaguely recognized from a plaque in the Marble Mount Ranger Station, honoring a lookout who'd gone missing in the fall of '84 without a trace. The entries were mundane for months, temperatures and wind speeds and smoke sightings, until the entry dated September 4th, which read only heard someone on the catwalk. No weather, no smoke. It's 2:14 a.m. The next day's entry. He stood at the east window. I saw his face. He's wearing my jacket. The day after that, he knows my name. I'm going to try the trail at first light. If anyone finds this, tell them the tower isn't empty. It was never empty. That was the final entry. Hollis sat frozen with a book in his lap, and at that exact moment, 2:14 a.m. by the clock on the wall, he heard the footsteps on the catwalk for the third night. They moved slowly, deliberately, past the south window, past the west window, and stopped at the east window, directly behind the chair where he was sitting. He didn't turn around. But in the faint reflection of the dark glass, he saw a second silhouette standing on the catwalk, taller than him, wearing a ranger's jacket. One pale hand pressed flat against the outside of the window. Then a voice, muffled by the glass but perfectly clear, whispered Hollis. "It's been a long season. Let me in so you can rest." Hollis didn't let him in. He didn't even move. He sat in that chair with his eyes squeezed shut until the sun rose and the footsteps faded. And when he finally looked, the catwalk was empty, and the old boot print on the railing had disappeared. He abandoned the tower that day, hiked out in 4 hours flat, and never went back. The Forest Service reassigned him to a desk job, and years later, when a young ranger asked him why he'd quit the lookouts, Hollis told them the truth. There's another man on Desolation Peak. His name is Calder. He's been up there since 1984, and he still wears the same jacket. The ranger laughed. Hollis didn't. Marin Odegaard took the keeper's position at Owl's Headlight because the isolation appealed to her in a way that no landlocked town ever had. The lighthouse stood on a granite shelf off the coast of Maine, connected to the mainland by a causeway that submerged at high tide, leaving the tower and the keeper's cottage cut off for 6 hours out of every 12. Marin's job was to maintain the automated beacon, log the weather, keep the historic structure from falling apart, while the Coast Guard decided whether to fund a full restoration. The original Fresnel lens had been replaced by an LED array in 1991. The old lamp room sealed off and locked. The massive brass and glass apparatus left to gather dust in the dark behind a padlocked iron door at the top of the spiral staircase. Marin had been told she didn't need to go up there. There was nothing to maintain. But on her third week, during a storm that rattled the windows and sent spray over the roof, the LED beacon began to flicker. She climbed the staircase to the lamp room door to check the electrical panel and found the padlock hanging open. The door was ajar. Inside, the old Fresnel lens was lit not with its original oil lamp, but with a pale, cold, blue-green glow that seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere at once, illuminating the massive prisms so that they rotated slowly, casting fractured ribbons of light across the curved walls. The rotation mechanism hadn't been powered in 30 years. Marin stood in the doorway, salt wind whistling through the cracked glass of the lamp room, and watched the impossible light sweep across her face. Then she heard a sound from the stairs behind her, a wet, dragging footstep, like a man climbing the spiral with waterlogged boots. She spun, flashlight raised, and the stairs were empty. The dragging continued. Step, drag, step, climbing closer. Marin slammed the lamp room door, turned to run down the stairs. and collided with something solid and cold that was not there when she looked. She stumbled through it, felt a brush of damp wool against her cheek, a smell of brine and old leather and something rotting, and then she was on the stairs running, the spiral dizzying, the dragging footsteps now behind her and above her, and somehow beside her all at once. She burst out of the tower into the storm and stood in the rain, staring up at the lamp room window. The blue-green glow was gone. The lead beacon flickered once and steadied. She radioed the mainland station, and the next day a maintenance team arrived to inspect the lens. The padlock was locked. The lamp room was empty, dusty, the Fresnel lens dark and motionless. Nothing was out of place. But under the pedestal, the team found a small leather diary, water-damaged and brittle. Belonging to a keeper named August Finley, who had served at Owl's Head from 1901 to 1903. The final entry was dated December 12, 1903. The night of the worst nor'easter in 40 years, Finley wrote that he had been trapped in the tower for 6 days, the causeway washed out, the supply boat unable to reach him, and that on the third night he'd seen a light inside the lens that isn't the flame, a cold light, and there's a man standing in the lamp room who wasn't there before. And he keeps pointing at the water, and I don't want to look. I don't want to see what he's pointing at, but I know if I go down to the rocks, I'll find the rest of them, the ones he brought with him. The diary ended there. August Finley was never seen again. Marin finished out her contract at Owl's Head because she needed the money. But she never climbed the staircase again. And on certain nights, when the tide was high and the fog was thick, she could see the lamp room window glowing with that same cold blue light, and she could feel the weight of someone standing on the staircase above her, waiting for her to come back up. Tate Okonkwo had worked third-shift security at the Meraux refinery outside New Orleans for 2 years, and he knew every gate, every camera, blind spot. Every corner where the old-timers claimed you could still smell the chemical leak from 73 that killed 14 men in the hydrocracker unit. The unit had been demolished years ago, replaced by a modern catalytic reformer. But the old control room for that section of the plant was still. Stanza, windowless concrete bunker set into the base of a rusted pipe rack, its door chained shut and marked with faded asbestos warnings. Tate's supervisor, a man named Broussard, had told him on his first day never to go near it. The chain was rusted solid, keys had been lost. There was nothing in there worth stealing, and no reason for a security guard to ever check it. But during a brutal August heat wave, the plant-running skeleton crew, and the night air so thick with humidity it felt like breathing soup, Tate noticed the chain on the bunker door was broken. The links lay in the gravel, the padlock missing entirely. He radioed Broussard. No answer. He figured it was squatters or copper thieves, and he decided to do a quick sweep himself rather than wait for backup that probably wouldn't come until morning. He pulled the door open and stepped into a stairwell that descended into cool, dry darkness. At the bottom, he found the old control room, a time capsule from the early 70s. The console still populated with analog dials and bakelite switches. The walls covered in yellowed operational notes, and a safety poster of a smiling cartoon drop of oil that read, "Every drop counts. Every worker matters." The air was stale, but under the dust and the dead electronics, there was another smell, wet concrete and diesel exhaust and something sharper, like chlorine or ammonia, the ghost of the leak that had killed those men. Tate swept his flashlight across the room and saw a door at the far end, partially open with a handwritten sign taped to it that read, "Sump Access." Do not enter during operation. He pushed through. Beyond it, a long concrete corridor sloped downward, the walls sweating, the floor tacky, with an old black residue that might have been oil, or might have been something else. The corridor terminated in a circular sump room, maybe 30 feet across, with a grated metal floor above a pit of stagnant water. And in that room, under a single flickering fluorescent light that had no business being on, 14 men were standing in a circle. They wore the remnants of 1973 work uniforms, blue coveralls, hard hats, steel-toed boots, but the coveralls were rotted, the hard hats cracked, the skin of their faces and hands was blistered and sloughing as if they'd been burned by something caustic and then left to heal wrong in the dark. They were all facing the center of the circle. They were all perfectly still. Tate couldn't breathe. He couldn't move. One of them, the tallest, slowly turned his head toward the doorway where Tate stood. The man's eyes were clouded, his lips cracked, and when he spoke, black fluid ran from the corner of his mouth. "Shift's not over, brother. Foreman says we stay till the leak is sealed." "You the relief crew? We've been here a long time." Tate shook his head, backing away, his boots slipping on the black residue. The man took a step toward him, and behind him, the other 13 turned their heads in unison. All of them now staring at Tate with those same clouded, patient eyes. The fluorescent light began to flicker faster, strobing the room, and in the flashes, Tate could see that the men's coveralls were all embroidered with the same name patch. M. Duval, T. LeBlanc, R. Carter, and Nuyenda, 14 names from the 73 memorial plaque. The tall one smiled and raised a blistered hand. "Gotta sign in first." Tate didn't sign anything. He ran back up the corridor, fell twice, scraped his palms raw on the concrete, and didn't stop until he was outside in the humid night. Gasping for air that didn't taste like chlorine, we drove straight to the plant entrance and called Broussard from his car, told him everything. Broussard was silent for a long moment, then said very quietly, "I told you not to go in there. You put that chain on for a reason. They never found all the bodies from 73 just pieces. The rest of them, we always figured, were still down in that sump room." The next morning, the chain on the bunker door was back, rusted solid, the links fused together as if they'd never been broken. Tate quit that day and moved to Houston. He still can't look at an oil refinery flare without seeing those 14 faces in the flicker. 3 night shifts. 3 people who thought they were alone. Hollis, who found a missing ranger still walking the catwalk of a fire tower 35 years after he vanished. Marin, who saw a light burning in a lighthouse lens that hadn't been powered in decades, and met the keeper who never left. Tate, who walked into a sealed sump room and found 14 men still waiting for a relief crew that never came. None of them were ever the same, and all of them to this day will tell you the same thing. The loneliest jobs in the world aren't as lonely as you think. You've been watching True Terror Files Official. If this episode got under your skin, hit that like button, subscribe, and ring the bell so you never miss another collection. I want to hear from you. Have you ever worked a night shift in a place that felt like it wasn't empty? Did you ever see something you couldn't explain? Drop your story in the comments. Till next time, remember, when you clock in for the graveyard shift, you never really know who else is on the clock.